My name is Brian, a recovered alcoholic. My sobriety date is February 2nd or February 1st, 1997. I always said the second, but somewhere along the line I had changed it. It was originally the first, and then I changed it to the second, so that way I had 24 hours when I got my first 24-hour chip. And then somewhere along the line, I actually just changed it back because I thought I had changed it in my first year, and I didn't. And I don't know when I actually changed it, but my first year I celebrated it on the first. So this year I just went back to the first. I guess the reason why I remember the second is because it's Groundhog Day. You know, at least it is here. Anyway, um, I'm very grateful to be sober. I'm very grateful to have the experiences, and I hope today, you know, my presentation on step 6 will help you have a better understanding and a better understanding and a better understanding of how this step actually works. And I'm going to tell you that I've had lots of experiences working the steps where we just read the questions, I answered a yes or no, and we went on. I'm going to tell you, I've had lots of sponsors that have taken me through step 6, and it was just like, it was this fast, like that. So I had to get that. It was that fast. Like, 6, I was like, wow, that was quick. And before I knew it, I was on 9. I went 6, 7, 8, 9, boom, real fast like that. Now, I don't do that anymore because I gotta really look at these steps. Step 6, I'll be honest with you, for many, many years, I didn't get a whole lot out of step 6. I just didn't, because go through it real quick. We ask the 2 questions that are there, do we answer satisfaction to the question, and we just move on, you see. But I don't want to do that because I am, me personally, I need a deeper experience with these steps, a deeper understanding with these steps. And that's really why I'm doing this workshop, because I have had a deeper understanding. Each time I go through this process, I have another understanding about myself. And each time, this is not something you just do once, one inventory. It's peeling layers of the onion. You see, and eventually, I'd like to get to my core, but I can only go to the core so often, and I pull things out of there that I either want to get. Most of the time I go into my core and I pull things out like defects of character. I don't want them anymore because it's messing me up in here. This is the spiritual malady on the inside, you know? What I want to focus on, I had an experience just not that long ago. Um, and now I want to go back. I want to start where we left off. So we left off on page 75. And we left off at the bottom of the page. We got to answer all these questions. I added in an extra question on here. And the extra question was, I want you to make a list of all the things that you found in your inventory that was objectionable, the things that you found distasteful, unpleasant, unwanted. And that's how we got to go into step 6. We got to go into step 6 with this list. We don't go into step 6 empty-handed. First off, we go into step 6 with a list of defects, a list of things that we don't want anymore. We're going to call those liabilities, because all those things that I listed, they are not assets, they're liabilities. These are things that are going to always keep bringing me down. Resentments, fears, my conduct. I got to change, right? Selfish, self-centered. Okay. But what I want to focus is, I want to go back to the previous paragraph where it lists the 8 promises of step 5. And the reason why I'm going back to these promises is because these promises will come true after you've shared your inventory with somebody that knows what they're doing. Because I've had shared my inventory with someone that didn't know what they're doing, and I completely didn't get anything out of it, except the freedom of just sharing it, I suppose. So I'm going to go down these promises. And if you have already shared your inventory, I just want you to highlight or underline the ones that have come true up to this point. So I'm going to start off where it says, there's only 2 lines, basically 1 line on step 5. All the rest of the stuff on page 75, 74, 73, 72 is all about step 4. If you remember on 73, it talks about the stage character. It goes right back into the ego all over again on 73. You see, it's not talking about 5. On 74, first paragraph talks about, sharing. It talks about confession, right? The next paragraph is all about a sponsor, closed mouth, understanding friend, you know, and we don't postpone this. The first paragraph on 75 says this is a life and death errand. This is life and my life, and my death. We're talking about a life and death. We're talking about, let's take this a step further about life and death. And let's take it to the point where it's the death of the old me and a rebirth of a new me. Okay. But I got to find out what I'm trying to, the death of the old me. I need to understand, what am I destroying? What am I getting rid of? What am I letting go of? You know, this is life or death. This is about your life and your death. It ain't about me. I've done the work. It's about you. Step 5 is a life or death. If I don't do step 5, what do they say? If you don't do a fourth, you'll pick up a fifth. So the only line on step 5 is on page 75. It's that second paragraph. It says we pocket our pride and go to it, eliminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. And that's all it says on step 5. That's why I did a whole workshop on step 5 on how to break down everything. And then it says the very next line, once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, put that in parentheses, withholding nothing. When I withhold nothing, this is what's going to happen. When I share my inventory, withholding nothing, it's good. The first thing first promise is going to happen is I'm going to be delighted. The second promise is we can look the world in the eye. You know what? I used to walk around with my head down, looking at the ground all the time. I didn't want to look anybody in the eye, and I didn't want anyone to look at me either. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. I can tell you what, when I was drinking it, I could not stand myself being alone. I could not stand it. Now I'm sober for a while. I can be alone at perfect peace and ease. It says our fears fall from us. They just fall because they don't fit anymore. If you remember about the anger, the fear prayer, right? We outgrow them because they don't fit. And then it says, we begin to feel. This is a feeling. Underline the word feel. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. I'm starting to feel really close to higher power, whatever it is. God, I'm starting to feel close to Him. Why am I feeling close, the nearness to my higher power? Because I've trusted Him. Even though I wasn't even doing it, I had trusted my higher power to get me all the way to this point. I didn't trust my sponsor. I trusted whatever power you found in step 2, you've trusted it all the way to this point. It says we may have had certain spiritual beliefs. So I may believe in something else. I may have certain spiritual beliefs. Okay. Whatever they might be. But it says, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. I begin to have an experience on the inside coming out. That's what a spiritual experience is. Now, I want to stop here for a second because we are going into step 6 under the influence of this spiritual experience that we're just having as the result of 5. Now, if you don't do 5, you haven't had the experience. It's hard for you to go into 6 without the experience. You see what I'm saying? Okay. I want to go back and I need to describe what a spiritual experience is because I'm just now beginning to have it. So, what is it all about? We're going to go to page 25. Okay. We're going to go to the middle of the page. If you remember, we're on page 25 and we're going to go to the second paragraph. On page 25, it's going to describe a spiritual experience. I want to understand, what am I under the influence of, right? It says the great fact is just this and nothing less. That we have had deep. This is why I go and do a deeper experience. For me, when I go and do a deeper experience with it doesn't matter what step, I personally end up having a deep and effective spiritual experience as the result of me going deeper into my inventory. Every single time I have a deep and effective spiritual experience. It says, which have revolutionized our whole attitude. It's changed my attitude, this experience toward life. It's changed the experience that I'm under the influence of from doing step 5 has changed my attitude toward life, toward my fellow, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we can never do for ourselves. A spiritual experience. He's doing something for me that I can't do for myself. Because remember, in the doctor's opinion, it said more, what was it? Something more than human power is needed to produce the psychic change within. Something more than human power is needed. Now, I'm not sure how these psychologists knew about all this stuff, you know? But you got to think about psychology and all this stuff's been going on for years and years and years, you know, and you got all kinds of uh, information out there, you know. So I'm going to go now to 27. I'm actually going to go and just read a little bit on 26 only because it talks about talks about Dr. Jung. It says a certain American businessman had ability. Well, this businessman was Rowan Hazard. Okay. Good sense, high character. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted best known American psychiatrists. He had gone to Europe, placing himself in care of a celebrated physician, the psychologist Dr. Jung, who prescribed for him, though experience had made him skeptical. We can call that doubt, right? He finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental conditions were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind that is hidden in its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Now let's think about this for just 1 second. All right, he's talking about self-knowledge. So he got this self-knowledge about himself, a physical allergy, mental obsession, right? He's got this inner workings of his mind. So they probably did some sort of inventory. Nonetheless, he was drunk in a short time. Why? More baffled still, he could give himself no satisfaction explanation for his fall. So he returned to the doctor, to this doctor. He returned to Dr. Jung, whom he admired, and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? He begged Dr. Jung to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. The doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. Remember, we talked about the 100% hopeless through all the chapters? Now, this is from a doctor. He's utterly hopeless. He could never, there's that word never, regain his position in society. He would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expect to live long. This was a great physician's opinion. That's Dr. Jung, right? But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on earth where other free men go without disaster, provided there's some direction there. He remained willing to maintain a certain simple attitude, right? But we're talking about an attitude being changed, though, right? Changing my attitude. That's a certain attitude, certain simple attitude that I'm going to have to take here, right? And the willingness to maintain willingness to maintain a certain attitude. Some of our readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of this conversation our friend had with this Dr. Jung. The Dr. Jung said, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where the state of mind exists in the extent that it does in you." Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed in on him with a clang. Think about that, man. I just lost all hope, right? I'm hopeless. He said to the doctor, "Is there an exception? Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the Dr. Jung. "There is exceptions to such cases as yours have been occurring since early times." Again, it's another description of a spiritual experience or a personality change. It says here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have what are called vital spiritual experiences. We're talking about an experience. We're not talking about a spiritual awakening that they're going to talk about in step 12. In the beginning, we're talking about an experience, something that you experience, not me. It says, to me, these occurrences are phenomenon. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side. So we're talking about a rearrangement, displacement with ideas, emotions, attitudes. Something's going on in my head, right? And let's think some of the guiding forces that were in my life was being driven by fear, right? Was being angry, my conduct, right? Is suddenly cast to one side. This is what we're going to do in a sense like step 6. We're bringing our defects into step 6, and they're about to be cast out, cast to one side in a sense, right? In a completely new set of conceptions, a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. A new set of conceptions, ideas, a new set of ideas and motives. My motives had to change. We learned about that in the sex inventory, right? They begin, you know, they begin to dominate them. These new conceptions and motives begin to dominate me. I want to go on to the next page, and I'm going to start with second paragraph. It says, we in turn sought the same escape with all desperation of downing men. I come into step 6, and I'm desperate, man. I'm like the drowning man, desperate as a drowning man. I don't want to be this guy no more that I just looked at in my inventory. I don't want to be him another day, the same way I was when I came to AA. I don't want to drink, and I don't want to, I don't want to go another day being who I am. It's desperate. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And if that means stay up all night and do inventory, then that's what my sponsor had me do. I stayed up all night, didn't sleep one wink, stayed up 24 hours, shared my inventory the next day. You know, it says what seemed at first a flimsy reed has proven to be a loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. Now, I'm just going to go down a little bit further. The disguised American psychologist William James, in the book Varieties of Religious Experiences, there's all kinds of different experiences. I posted a PDF file to that actual book in the Big Book Experience What's Up app, so anybody can download it and read it. It's a hard read, but it's good. And that's why I want to go now to the back of the book, and I want to read the spiritual experience. Um, I think it's 565 or something. Can you unmute yourself, Sean? Or no?
567.
567. I got the one that doesn't have stories. For me, it's 183. And I'm going to read the whole thing. I don't know if we read this during step 2 or not. I can't remember, but I want to read it because it's talking about a personality change, you know? And so the term spiritual experience and spiritual awakening I use many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that the personality change, underlying that personality change, sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism, has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Has manifested in many different forms. It is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes, which is the same thing as a psychic change, that's why I'm bringing it up, or religious experiences, you see, a spiritual experience is more of a religious experience, must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheaval. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. So you can have an experience, okay? In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes have described. That's what we talked about in 25 and 27. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nonetheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Now, that is a a pretty good spiritual experience. Once I have an experience, I start to develop this God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. You see, that's the spiritual experience. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformation, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James called the education variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. You can often see the difference in somebody when they have an experience. You know, when they've had a spiritual experience, when somebody, when I've just shared, when somebody had just shared step 5 with me, I can totally see. I can see it. I can see the experience, on their face. Uh, I can usually see it quite often. The friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. You know, he finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration, a profound, I'm going to underline that, a profound alteration in his reaction to life. I'm started to react differently in life. That such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone, what often takes place in a few months, we're talking about going through the steps in a few months, could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped, underline that word, tapped, an unsuspected inner, underline that word, inner research, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than themselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. The essence of a spiritual experience is becoming aware of God in your life. Most of the awareness of a power, see, the awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spirit, being aware that there is a higher power. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. And that's why, if you ever hear me read the set-aside prayer, I always put in there spiritual conceptions. Keep an open mind to all spiritual conceptions. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance and belligerent denial. I can only be defeated by my attitude of intolerance and denial. That's a warning. Defeated. Now, if you remember, it says we find that no one had difficulty with the spirituality program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials to recover, but these are just indispensable, absolutely necessary. There's a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. I almost look at the contempt as sort of a lot of doubt, maybe even prejudice. And you kind of take that and go into step 2 with that, So what I really wanted to focus in here was a personality change. It's listed twice, first in the first paragraph and once in the second paragraph. Personality change, and then you got the word spiritual experience. Okay. Okay. So I covered the spiritual experience. I want to know what this experience is about. It's a rearrangement, right? Deep and effective, which has revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, God's universe. The central factor of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives, which is, in a way, indeed miraculous. He has accomplished those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. So I'm coming into step 6, okay? And it says we begin to have a spiritual experience on 75. Begin. So that means that I am going to move into step 6 under the influence of the spiritual experience that I'm just starting to have in step 5. Does everybody follow me on that? It says, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. Now I'm going to tell you, when I'm under the influence of that experience, sometimes I am aware and sometimes I am not. when I'm under the influence of a spiritual experience. Sometimes, again, I'm going to repeat that. Sometimes I am aware of the experience and I embrace it. Other times, I am not aware until after the fact. And I go, oh, wow, that was an experience. And then I got hindsight and look back. Okay. So I'm coming in to step 6 under the influence of a spiritual experience. That's a beautiful place to be, under the influence, right, of the spiritual experience. You know, on on page 72, you don't need to go there. I'm just going to read one line. It says, trying to avoid this humbling experience, they have turned either easier methods. Trying to avoid this humbling experience. I have to get really humble. And that's what happens to me in step 5. I get really humble, not egotistical. I'm the opposite. When I'm sharing my step 5, I'm humble, you know. It is only after we have completed step 5 when humility has been experienced. I have to experience humility. And self-respect has been restored as a result of our admitting to God and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. That we are in a suitable spiritual condition under that spiritual experience to sincerely carry out the provisions in step 6. You see, this action brings an unknown feeling of moral strength. For the first time, we are facing our real selves, the selves whose root has touched and are now drawing up an unfailing source of assurance, power, and security. We find in the consummation of these steps a new peace, a release from tension and anxiety, as we now are laying our misconceptions and defects of character in God's hands. We are asking Him to rid them from our lives. We are expecting great mental cooperation with God. That's what step 6 is, a cooperation now with that power, a cooperation. We feel an intense humility that cries out for recognition and divine help. The spiritual lift, the earnestness to our Creator that is experienced from humble invocation of His help, and our willingness to be free from old willful thoughts and habits are essential to successfully obtain these steps. The mental hygiene and spiritual house cleaning we have started in our inventories and continued in step 5 reached a climax in step 6 when we fully subject our wills to God and wish to surrender to Him all of our moral imperfections. Several objections to step 6 are: 1. To become honest and humble. To willingly seek God's help without reservation. Now, you don't have to write these down. I can send them over to you if you want. You don't have to write them down, but there's going to be, I got 7 of them. Number 2, to perfect ourselves in the practice of unselfish prayer. To perfect ourselves in practice of unselfish prayer. 3, to be aware of our defective character traits. Be aware of them so we can ask God when they come up. We can ask God to remove them. Be aware of them. To desire their removal. 5, to surrender completely all defects of character. Surrender completely. To believe that God can remove them. Believe that God can, that God will. 7, ask Him to take them all away. The results we expect from pursuit of these objectives are: 1, a reconciliation in God's way of doing business. We become fed up with our way, and with further practice of trying to run the show ourselves, we get fed up with that, and we're going to do it God's way. A willingness to work out a plan for suppression of self-centeredness or the ego through faith and conscious contact with God. Again, I'm going to read that again. Number 2, willingness to work out a plan for suppression of our ego through faith and conscious contact with God. As we learned in step 4, I think it was, that prayer helps tame the ego, helps kill the ego, however you want to look at it. When we make that conscious contact with God, ego's no place. The ego wants nothing to do with God. He needs us to carry out his work. But when we're serving somebody else, when we're serving God, we can't serve the ego. We can't serve both at the same time. 3, to experience dissatisfaction as a result of our alcoholic practices and to seek a spiritual inspiration that will bring us an inner sense of peace and serenity. Peace and serenity on the inside from doing inventory. 4, increase faith, clean hearts and minds, ability to offer unselfish prayer. 5, a spiritual courage that is fearless in its outlook on life. A spiritual courage that is fearless in its outlook on life. A desire to make restitution to those our drinking has harmed. 6, a desire to quit bluffing and honestly give God a chance to remove from our lives all that stands in the way of our usefulness to Him and to others. True humility is experienced. 7, elimination of our defective character traits. Acquisition of inner peace and sobriety. The spiritual attitude and satisfactory frame of mind necessary to effective fulfillment of these steps have been progressively worked towards in the completion of the first 5 steps of our program. Prayer, our highest type of mental energy, prayer is our highest type of mental energy, serves a threefold purpose. By it, we ask God's help. We thank Him for our recovery, and we maintain our contented sobriety. There is nothing outstanding about an alcoholic's prayer to God. It is just a simple, sincere affair in which the alcoholic has nothing to lose, but for which he gains sobriety, sane behavior, peace of mind, and happiness for himself and his family. There is power within each of us that develops through conscious contact with God. It replaces alcoholic fear and weakness with spiritual strength and understanding. It replaces alcoholic fear and weakness with spiritual strength and understanding. Through it, a miracle of AA is possible. Step 6 utilizes this contact with thousands of alcoholics have humbly used in removing their defects of character. In step 2, we found the forge in which we heat and form the separate links that go into the new personality chain we are building. Without them, your rehabilitation is impossible. Restoration of your mental and spiritual health is in direct proportion to our recognized need for help and our willingness to work for recovery. Dishonesty, brain damage, indifference, and reservations are the only limits to your recovery. A divine type of surgery is suggested by step 6. I really love this. A divine type of surgery is suggested by step 6. Humble prayer becomes the spiritual scalpel with which God cuts out the damaged portions of our sick personalities. Complete surrender to God's will assures us the painless, successful operation. Man, this is like where all the work is happening, man. You know, it's so important to sit down and write that inventory and then share it with somebody. It's so important that you just do these steps, you know, because you're not going to experience the promises if you don't. What does it say? They always work. What does it say in step 9 in the promises? They work for them. They will always materialize if we work for them. We got to work, man, you know, but I'm going to tell you, this step work is a lot of work, but I'm going to tell you that it's worth it. It's worth every amount of energy that you put into it. It is worth it 100-fold. This surrender of our defects to a higher power is not the spiritless act of a defeatist, but the intellect act of an alcoholic who would replace his fear and weakness with spiritual courage, understanding, strength, and contented sobriety. So we humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Humbly ask him. Humbly. Humbly ask him. I'm going to talk about something called the ripple effect. We have the ripple effect in all of our actions that we just inventoried. There's a ripple effect from our actions. Now, we can look at that inventory and see that ripple effect all over the place with people that we have harmed indirectly. That's the ripple effect, indirectly. When we first practice step 6, wholeheartedly, they transform us. Step 6 follow us from our past. It's going to follow us from our past to help us to honestly see our limitations and our humanness. It enables us to look at where we didn't want to go, but we knew we needed to. It's the deep inside where we didn't want to go. I don't want to expose myself. I don't like what I am. I don't want you. If you see what I really am, you ain't going to like me, right? That was always my battle cry. As we practice step 6, day by day and moment by moment, it continuously transforms us in all our relationships. We move from establishing a relationship with our higher power to experiencing that power in all of our relationships. I'm going to read that one more time. We move from establishing a relationship with our higher power. We move from establishing a relationship with our higher power to experiencing that power in all of our relationships. Experiencing the power. We move from hearing each step resonates in our head to feeling it in our guts, our bones, and our blood. We move from learning the steps to living them. Most of all, we move from a focus on our own growth and transformation to the focus on how our behavior affects others. This change in focus is what I call the ripple effect. It's the effect we have on other human beings. It's the effect we have on other. So if we have ripple effect from the past, then we have ripple effect in the future. Think about it. If I help one person and they in turn help another person and they in turn, you see how it just keeps on going, right? Right? It's a ripple effect. The effect that we have on other human beings based on what we do or don't do, what we say or don't say, how we show up in each moment of other people's lives. When we act or react from one of our character defects, like impatience. Now, I want to focus on impatience because when we come out of step 4, we came out of step 4 with a couple assets. One of them was patience, and one of them was tolerance. All you got to do is go back and read, I think it's page 70, right at the bottom. It says, we have begun to learn, at step 4, to learn tolerance and patience. So I'm going to come out of step 4 or step 5 with the assets of tolerance and patience. Now, both of those are found on 67, and they're found in the sick man prayer, right? There's another word in here on page 70, and it says goodwill. Now, we're talking about assets here for a second. Goodwill. Goodwill is basically a friendly, helpful, cooperative feeling or attitude. So basically, it's about being cooperative. A goodwill is about being cooperative. I want you to go to page 61, and we pointed out some assets back when we were there, okay? It says, I think I'm going to go down. I'm going to start on 61, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down. It says, in trying to make these arrangements, our actors may sometimes be. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. I was talking to Sean about this earlier. So we have a bunch of assets here. We wrote them down. We got virtuous, we got kind, we got considerate, patient, generous. There's that patient again. The second time patient showed up. Generous, and even modest, and self-sacrificing. And then further down, we found the word gracious. And so we listed them. We had 8 assets. And I wrote them on the side of the margin on page 61. Virtuous, kind, considerate, patient, generous, modest, self-sacrificing, and gracious. Now, all that represents is goodwill. That's all goodwill. Now, what I want to tell you is when I want to be kind, that's the thing. When I want to be any of these things, I am going to do it off the chart. I am going to be the best. When I want to be kind, I'm going to be the kindest. And everybody's going to say, you're the kindest person I ever met. And I'll be like, yes. Okay. And then when I want to be considerate, I'm going to be so considerate. Everybody's going to say, Brian, you're a really considerate guy. You see, when I want to be good, man, I am the best. When I want to charm somebody, I'm going to be Prince Charming, right? When I want to be, says right here, when I want patient, when I want to be patient, dude, I got so much patience, right? Or generous and giving, right? Self-sacrificing. When I want to do those things, I do them to the best of my ability. I want you to think about this for 1 second. You know when you got to be on your best behavior when you're trying to impress somebody. And what are you doing? You're being kind, considerate, patient, generous, modest, self-sacrificing, and virtuous and gracious. That's what you're doing, right? When you're charming people. When I want to be, I can be these things. You think about that. When you really want to be on your best behavior, you will be. Therefore, it's coming from a good place. Therefore, these are all assets that I'm bringing out of step 4, step 5. Kind, considerate, patient, because there's nothing negative about it. When I want to be like that, I am. When I want to be. The whole point is to be like this all the time. Why am I just like this when I want to be versus being like that all the time? Why do I want to be kind when I'm kind when I want to be? Why can't I be kind all the time? Why can't I be considerate all the time, and patient all the time, and generous and modest and self-sacrificing all the time? Because these things have been blocked off because of resentment, because of fear, right? All that stuff has been blocking you. If you remember on page 70, on page 71, it says, we hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him. So all this stuff that's blocking, it's blocking you off from accessing these assets that you've already had. Okay? So again, that falls underneath goodwill. And I wrote goodwill in the corner and I just listed them all. Okay, that means I'm going to have goodwill. Goodwill means I'm kind of aligning my will with God's will. It's good. Goodwill means I'm doing good things. The point of step 6, right, is that I'm coming into step 6 not with just a list of liabilities, my resentments and my selfishness and my self-centeredness and my ego and all this stuff. I'm not only just bringing in a list of liabilities, I'm also bringing in a list of assets. And I'm going to explain it why, because the very next paragraph after step 6, which is on 76 here, the very next paragraph, it says, when ready, we say something like this. Now, I'm not going to say the prayer yet because I'm going to say that for next week. It says, my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad, period. All of me, good and bad. Okay, so that means I already know what the good and bad is before coming to step 7. I find out the good and bad in step 6 because I already know about the bad that we inventoried. And then the assets come out. I pull the assets out, but you don't really know what to do with them yet because they're covered up. You see, they're blocked off. How can I be patient if I'm blocked off, if I'm angry, right? If I'm blocked off. If I'm not blocked off, I can do all those things when I'm not blocked off. I can be kind, considerate, right? Wait. In contrast, I'm going to go a little bit further. I want to talk about patience for a second because that's one of the assets, right? So you make a decision to cut. For example, your decision to cut in front of another driver. Now, I'm going to talk about this because I'm a truck driver and it makes better sense for me. But everybody drives. Everybody does that. Okay. So I just want you to follow me with this story for a second. All right. Your decision to cut in front of another driver on a highway may result in other drivers feeling angry or anxious. Now think about it. If I'm weaving in and out of traffic, it's going to make some people a little nervous, right? I am creating that in them. I am creating that in them. Remember how we did the sex inventory? Do we create jealousy, suspicion? Now I'm looking at, I've created, by me cutting people off, I've created other drivers feeling angry, anxious. It may also cause a collision. That collision, in turn, may make the driver late for an important job interview. And because she doesn't get the job, she and her partner can't afford to pay their medical bills. 6 months later, they are forced to file for bankruptcy. This may be an extreme example, but it demonstrates how seemingly inconsequential actions can have dramatic effect. Again, patience. In contrast, when we follow the spiritual guidance of these steps and a higher power, acting or reacting from a spiritual service state, what we do or don't do ripples out to the people around us as well, but in a positive way. Instead of letting ourselves be pushed around by our impatience, instead of letting ourselves be pushed around by our impatience, you think about it. When you're cutting in front of people, you're pushing people out of your way, right? Instead, wait. Instead of letting ourselves be pushed around by our importance, we recognize in that moment of impatience, that it has risen up inside us. That feeling, that impatience, rises out from inside us. In the next moment, we identify it as a shortcoming or a character defect. Next, we recognize that we, in the world, would be better off if we didn't act impatient. Next, we ask our higher power to take our impatience from us and to start practicing being more patient with others. So from this moment forward, we're going to start practicing having more patience with others, and we're going to start practicing having more tolerance, because those are the two big assets that we get out of step 4. This very process has transformed us in that short string of moments from impatient to patient. Imagine that this transformation happens to you on the road to work. Instead of cutting off the driver in the next lane, you smile and wave her in front of you, and she smiles and waves back. I just think that's great, right? I mean, that's the truth. When you let somebody in front of you, I mean, when they don't wave, I want to, show them, salute them, number one. But, when I let people and they wave at me, I wave back. And it's just common courtesy to be patient like that, right? So start being more patient. Over time, this daily practice can evolve into one that can do several times each day. Eventually, we do it in the very moment that we catch ourselves acting out on one of the shortcomings or character defects. As we keep practicing step 6, we learn to catch ourselves even sooner. Whenever we have the impulse to act from one of our character flaws from the inside, with practice, we then learn to be aware of the rising of the emotion that generates or precedes such an impulse. We become aware of it in here before it even comes up. We start to become aware. Then one day we discover that working and practicing the step in each moment has become as natural as walking or dressing and chatting with friends. I'm giving you, like a program of action, right? Come out of step 5. Patience, tolerance, goodwill. We can start by being more patient, letting people in front of you. Start practicing patience. You're at a store. Let somebody in front of you that might have 1 or 2 items. Just start practicing it. It'll help you feel better. It just will. You do something for especially people you don't know. And by practicing patience, aren't you also practicing tolerance and being tolerant? And because you have to because you have to wait, right? You have to be patient. So I think that being patient, you're also being tolerant too. Step 6 is a step of surrender. I've always thought it was a step. It's like another surrender from step 3. We trust This is the step of surrender and trust, not self-will or self-determination. We surrender our ideas of which defects stand in the way of our usefulness to God and ourselves. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. God, not me, makes me different by giving me what it takes to change. It is my job to act and behave like the change has occurred. So we're asking God, you got to know what you're asking God to remove of first. And then we're going to start acting the opposite. Okay? This is a big change here in step 6. So it's my job to act and behave like the change has occurred, like God has already removed it. In order to do this, the process of change happens. Frequently, this involves emotional pain. The pain of living the way I have become. Wait. The pain of living the way I have been becomes greater than the fear of change. I'm going to read that one more time. The pain of living the way I have been becomes greater than the fear of change. The defects that remove me from service are removed on or for the day I ask. God lets me ask the rest of the God lets me keep the rest of the defects to remind me of my need for daily spiritual contact and daily inventory. They remind me that there is a God and it isn't me. In order to have God remove our defective character, we must realize that we can't change ourselves completely by ourselves or have any lasting good purpose without spiritual intervention. Remember, lack of power was our dilemma. We find a power by which we can live. How do we know when we are entirely ready? How do we know when you are hungry? Some have experienced an entire readiness as a feeling of being completely burned out or being at the end of a rope. Others have received the sponsor's validation of readiness. Most of us experience this readiness after we had become very familiar with the feeling, and experience of not being ready and not being willing to be changed. We make friends with our defects and know how they serve us. This results in knowing how they no longer serve us. Defects of character are our best attempt to get our needs met. They have saved our lives. Many problems have won of ignorance. I don't know what my basic human needs were and therefore didn't know how to meet them. I had no clue what they were, so they weren't being met. The hole in me, the neediness, the hunger, the ache in my life that I tried to fill or stay distracted from by using addictive behaviors is actually the perfectly logical result of not knowing and therefore not accepting myself as I am. I was wrong, not bad. I did look bad, and I didn't get my needs met, so I ignorantly, apparently, insanely, and desperately repeated what I knew more and more, and less and less and less. Deprivation and overconsummation are flip sides of the same coin. The point of recovery is finding balance. Finding balance incorporates awareness gained in steps 4 and 5 with the action, the behavior changes in prayer gained in step 6. Like the pendulum, we swing from one extreme of behavior to the other. Yet these points of extreme slowly become closer and closer. We change. Wanting to become willing to feel different is not foreign to us. It was this willingness that we used to feed our addictive behaviors. We wanted to feel different. Now, though, we ask God and we become ready to have character defects removed by using our awareness of ourselves and our will to be different. A new way of being, a new way of thinking, a new way of behaving, and a new way of relating. Getting a lot done here. I hope everybody's having a good experience with this so far. I got a couple things I want to throw out here. Are you ready to have your defects removed? Are you ready? Now, I'm going to tell you that I am in, again, I'm going back to what I first talked about in the beginning. I am in that best frame of mind to go to God and ask him to remove my defects of character easier when I'm under the influence of a spiritual experience from step 5. When I'm under that influence of a spiritual experience, it's real easy for me to let go of things that no longer serve me. I don't hold on to anything because I'm under the spiritual experience. You see? So I'm coming into step 6 with the spiritual experience. Am I ready? Are you ready to have defects removed? Can God remove them all? Does God really have your permission to take them? And then does God really have the power? Are you willing to have God remove? I'm going to give you a list of stuff. Are you willing to have God remove the defects, your motives, your behavior, your beliefs? Maybe you're still holding on to a little bit of prejudice or a little bit of doubt or something like that. You know, are you willing to have God remove defects, motives, behavior, beliefs, attitudes? What about values? There's 6 of them. My willing defects, my motives, my behavior, and my beliefs. Now, that doesn't mean that God's going to take away all my motives. He's just going to take away my bad motives because I always have good motives, right? So I'm going to read them all to you one more time. Defects, motives, behavior, beliefs, attitudes, and the last one is values. Now, that could go underneath conceptions too. I always like to give out a couple of questions too. I got a bunch here. These are questions taken into prayer and meditation. So here's the first question. What is the most prominent obstacle I use to shut out the sunlight of the spirit? What is the most prominent obstacle that you use to shut out the sunlight of the spirit? Take it into meditation. Have an experience, a deeper experience with step 6. Second question. Now, if you want to copy these questions, just ask me. I'll send them to you. Number 2, how is it manifested in thought and attitude, feeling, emotion, behavior, and activity? How is it manifested in thought, attitude, feeling, emotion, behavior, activity? How has it manifested? 3, what is its source? We're talking about a defect. What purpose? Number 4, what purpose does it serve? 5, what is its value to me? We're talking about you holding on to a defect, right? That's what we're talking about. So 5 is, what is its value? 6, is it a compensation for a need or deficiency I perceive I have? That's 6. Is it a compensation for a need or deficiency I perceive I have? This next question is a big one. Number 7. What do I fear might happen if I let go of this behavior? What do I fear might happen if I let go of this behavior? I got 3 more questions, Sean. So I know you're at the bottom of the page, just so you know, I got 3 more. 8, how does this behavior protect me from pain? Ooh. How does this behavior protect me from pain? How does this behavior protect me from pain? 9, what feeling does this behavior help me avoid? What feeling does this behavior help me to avoid? One more time. What feeling does this behavior help me to avoid? You know, I'm going to give it, talk about this for a second. What feeling does this behavior help me avoid? I used to do things all the time to avoid stuff, even if it was feeling a certain way. I would avoid feeling a certain way too. And then the last one, am I really ready and willing to have it removed? Are you really ready and willing to have it removed? Now, if not, I'm going to read that one more time. Am I really ready and willing to have it removed? And then if not, am I willing to pray for the willingness? All right. Again, we're coming out of page 75 under a spiritual experience, right? It asks us to review twice. All right. Did we leave anything out? You're about to be a free man. We inventory the bondage of self so you can be free from that. I'm going to go to the top of page 76. It says, if you can answer to our satisfaction, that means if you answer yes to all those questions on 75, then we look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Indispensable means absolutely necessary. So willingness is absolutely necessary. That's why it says. So, well, it's going to say it here in a second. We got 2 questions. 2 questions. I got them highlighted in purple. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all, underline that word, all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Remember that list you made? Remember that list that you made of all the things you found to be objectionable in step 5 or in step 4? You're bringing that list into step 6. You're also bringing the list of assets, patience, tolerance, goodwill. So you know what's good and you know what's bad. 2 lists you're bringing into step 6, not just one. You come out of step 4 and 5 with assets. These assets are so important because they've always been a part of you. You're born with these assets. It's just as life goes on, you start blocking them off with resentments and fear and and all the other stuff. Once you remove what's blocked, the sunlight of the spirit can come inside you, and you can start to grow. All those good qualities that have already been a part of you can now come to the surface. Before you were too afraid to let them, now you can let them come to the surface. And that's your true self. It says, can he now take them all, everyone? Can God? Is that power? Remember we agnostics, and I said, man, I got to find a power bigger than my ego. Is that power that you believe in, no matter what it is it powerful enough to take them all, everyone? Do you believe that God will take everyone away from you? If we still cling to something, we will not let go. Well, it's pretty obvious. If I'm still clinging, obviously I didn't let go. I always like to, do something. I don't really have anything. Yeah, I'm gonna do it like this. So I always like to think of things I don't want, right? Inventory, things I don't want, right? What do we do with things we don't want? I know what I do with things I don't want. You see, things I don't want, we throw it away. Or we give it away to someone that can use it. Now, nobody's going to use my defects of character, so I'm not giving them away. But I'm going to ask God to remove them. And what that means is, again, I want to show you what it's like to let go. You see, I'm holding on to the paper in my hand, right? You know what I have written on this paper? Self-centeredness, egotistical, right? I got all that list of all the stuff out of my inventory. And now I'm going to crumple into a ball, right? And I'm just going to open my hand because that's what it's about. You see how I just opened my hand? And you see how my hand's flat and the paper's gone? I let go of it. Now, granted, it fell on the floor. But most of us When we don't want something, we throw it away in the garbage. And then I am not going to put my hand in the garbage just to pull out something that says selfish on it. You see what I'm saying? It's about letting go and being free. The whole part of being free from the bondage of self is about letting go. And that's what step 6 is about. It's about letting go, being ready. That's all it is. Having the willingness to let go. Having the willingness. It actually doesn't even say we let go, but it's having the willingness. If we still cling to something, we will not go. We will not let go. We ask God to help us be willing. So I'm still clinging to it. I'm going to ask God to just open my hand. And I can let go. Now, from this moment forward, I want you to pretend as if God has already taken that away. Whatever you're going to ask God to remove, from this moment forward, you have to pretend as if it's been removed. So you get a negative thought, impatient, you automatically start doing the opposite. Start doing the opposite. Practice. You can go in front of me, wave somebody in front of you. You know, you're at the grocery store, let somebody go in front of you that has less items. Just start practicing it. Start practicing it and see what's going to happen. Start practicing the opposite of what's going on in here. You see, eventually, this is going to start to fix itself because we're going to start thinking positively all the time, and negative thoughts come. We want to get rid of them right away. We don't want to hang on to it because it's going to destroy what I got going on in here. And what I got going on here is something spiritual. So I don't want anything to destroy it. And I like my peace and serenity inside. And so my problems are of my own making. And my sponsor said, Brian, stop creating your own problems. This is that moment in step 6. You're looking back at the past, and all you see is all the destruction that you've left. You don't know what your future is in store because you can't see, but you've got hindsight to look what's behind. And I know for me, I don't want to go back to that life. Not for 1 second do I want to go back there at all. So I keep moving forward. I keep that gift of desperation with me every day. That gift of desperation, being willing to go to any length, because this thing has saved my life. It's completely changed me. I am no longer the person I used to be when I came here. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to you. Step 6 is just being willing. Being willing. Whether I understand it, or whether I understand or not, I'm ready. I want to go all the way back to the real me. And here, spiritual psychic change happens on the inside. A spiritual experience happens on the inside. I want to go as deep as I can so that experience is way and comes out. It's a beautiful thing when that happens. It's such a beautiful thing to feel such peace and serenity in here, not in here, in here. Then I start to, once I feel it here, it just happens up here. You can begin creating a new reality. You're the one. Remember, you were the creator of everything. You created all your problems. And you created the reality. You created the false sense of self. You created the ego state. You've created all of that. Okay? But now you can begin to create a new reality. A new reality. Not the old one, which was all self-delusion and all. Now a new reality. I can actually recreate myself. I can recreate myself. Or at least experience that true self for a change. After finishing step 5, the alcoholic may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but he now begins to have a spiritual experience, an awakening of self. You see, when the alcoholic takes the action in the first 3 steps, the alcoholic has begun the process of recreating himself. The way to recreate oneself is to follow the exact opposite path to follow when the falsehood were created in the first place. The alcoholic, through his thought life, words, and actions, have created a reality in which he had doomed himself to die of alcoholic death. Think about that. In order to reverse this process, the alcoholic must reverse the order of his creating. That is, he takes action first. Remember, be patient, tolerant. I take action first. This leads to the change in the words spoken, and that will lead to the change in thought life. By pulling away from those states, the anger state, the ego state, the fear state, the alcoholic begins to experience oneness with the true self. His fears begin to fall away. Why? Because if there is no self, then there can be no fear. Think about that when you're spiritually fit, right? Because why? Because if there is no self-will, then there can be no fear. I begin to feel freer than I've ever felt before. I can be alone at perfect peace and ease. There is a big difference between being alone and being lonely. By pulling away from those states of being, the alcoholic then experiences a true knowing of God within, for he has begun to experience the death of self-will and the birth of tapping into the power within. The death of self-will. I have begun to experience God manifesting through me, meaning, do I know my true self now? Have the actions I have taken resulted in conscious contact with the higher power? Having answered these questions through the advantage of this new spiritual awareness, the alcoholic then looks at step 6. In this step, he must ask himself if he is willing to let God remove from him the defects that his self-will created to sustain itself to be. Then he must ask himself if he truly believes that God will remove these defects. If the defects don't go away, they will take the drunk back to the state of consciousness called the spiritual malady, and in that state, he will drink. You see, this step is all about change, man. All about change. You know, the crazy part is that when people tried to help me, my thought life was so twisted that I actually believed they were at fault. You think about that. Every time someone came into your life when you were drinking and using whatever, and they tried to help you, they tried to help you. Come to a meeting with me. I can't tell you how many times people have tried to help me, and I actually believe they were at fault, or they were trying to get something out of me, or whatever it might be. They were at fault. Now I understand what you mean when you say that all of my troubles are of my own making. I also understand what you mean when you say that this is the greatest statement of hope I will ever hear, for I get to recreate that which I created, which was all wrong from a delusional state, right? I see now that if my problems were of someone else's making, I couldn't do anything about them. But since my problems are of my own making, I can stop doing the things that cause my trouble. Stop doing the things that cause you trouble. Start doing the opposite, right? At least you can now. Before you were driven, so you had no choice. By tapping into this newly found power, you can recreate a life, and it can be a life filled with joy, peace, love, acceptance, gratitude. I almost had to die of alcoholism to be reborn, to be given the gift of recreating. I want to thank you all for being here and being, man. I hope I just really did justice on this and packed it so much. Please start with assets that you got from the inventory. Start practicing being patient. Start practicing being more tolerant of others. Right? Start practicing that goodwill, that kindness from page 61. Right? Kindness. I'm just going to read it one time before I let you all go. All right? Start practicing this. You know you can be good when you want to be. So then be good all the time. Okay? Be good all the time. That's going to start to change rearrangements, right? Used to be a guiding force driving of my life is suddenly cast aside. And a new, completely set of conceptions begin to dominate me. Again, kind, considerate, patient, generous, modest, self-sacrificing, and tolerant. Start practicing these. When you get a negative thought and it starts triggering a defect, just go start act out on the opposite, whatever that might be, whatever's going on in your mind. Again, step 6 is about willingness. If you're still holding on to something, pray for the willingness to let go, like I do with that piece of paper. Let go. Well, that was about 90 minutes. Anyway, I want to thank you all for being here, and let's close this workshop. I didn't open up with the set aside prayer, but I do want to end it with a moment of silence for the still sick and suffering alcoholic. And I always say this when I say that could be the person sitting next to you in a meeting, suffering in sobriety. So just take a moment and think about that. Somebody you might know, family member, friend, somebody might be suffering. Think about Ebby going to Bill. You know, they had to sit him down and say, Ebby, who can you think of that could need your help? And he said, oh, I know Bill, you see? And that's what we're doing now. We're taking that moment to kind of think about who you could go help. I always like the serenity prayer to end it just because it's simple. So I'm going to end it with the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, other people, and the courage to change the things I can, myself, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.